Okay. Lisa and I have collaborated. This is we have been playing phone tag. We're going to improvise a little bit tonight, which will just make it that much more endearing, I'm sure. We wanted to review something about Ted and in particular his patents. As Bruce had said before, that when I consider my uncles and father, there's Dr. Lindgren, a double Dr. Lindgren, Dr. Lindgren, and Dr. Lindgren. Ted being the double Dr. Lindgren, and of the four brothers, Ted just had this. They're all different. Ted had a quintessential coolness to himself. He was just so stylish and cool and fun. And when you dig into his patents, that just comes through in spades as to what Ted was kind of about. So we have a little presentation, and then to be a little deconstructionist, postmodernist, maybe we're gonna establish Ted as a human being, go deep into his patents where I completely hit a wall and got my butt kicked, and then go back to Ted as a human being.
Okay.
So let me jump in here and share.
Bruce, you got that ready to go?
Yeah. All set.
Let me see here. Okay, can you see a screen?
Yes, brushless DC motors.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
We're going to warm up a little bit first here to get kind of set the stage. There's an old saying that ordinary people are interested in extraordinary things, and extraordinary people are interested in very ordinary things. When I was a little boy, I was a pretty rough and tumble little guy, and I had toys that I almost always broke. And the first time I became aware of brushes, I don't know if it was a little car that went around a racetrack or an electric train, but I broke it. Of course, had to tear it apart. And then I saw a brush on a DC motor, and every time it spun around the commutator, it sparked. And I was like, this is a horrible design. Someone must be able to do better. And nobody did, until Ted, I think.
Oh.
Well, let me start with when it gets weird, you know you're on the right track here. This is a picture of Queen Victoria from about 1850. She reigned from 1837 to 1901. And what's important about this, to put it into context, is the first brush DC motor was invented in 1837. And that just drops my jaw. Maxwell's equations were not, which unifies electromagnetism into one physical phenomenon, didn't come until about 1880. And it's just shocking that 50 years before that, Queen Victoria, people are using it for practical purposes. I just find that absolutely shocking.
Wow.
And that Ted is kind of interested in this is going to be crucial. And in a strong piece of contrast, this is Adam Ant, who in the 1980s, 1982, he had a hit called Goody Two Shoes, which was a quintessential over-the-top 1980s pop hit. And when you look at electrical engineering in the 80s, there are things like the transistor was about 40 years old. The integrated circuit was about 20 years old. Richard Feynman, the Nobel Prize winning physicist, had written a paper that said there's plenty of room at the bottom. A huge push of electrical engineering was miniaturization, make things just as small, as tight as possible, so you can have more room for more memory and so forth. I mean, and I like the contrast of the pictures of Queen Elizabeth and Adam Ant.
Oh.
By the way, a lot of Ted's work came in the mid to late 80s. So in the kind of the age of Adam Ant, he's thinking about Queen Victoria. And of things to come, this is a picture from one of Ted's patents. Now, I guess he has 7. I just chose one. It's about brushless DC motors because it's something I know what a brush is. And that's as far as I could get. But he did some very, very interesting work. For those of you who are looking for context of how you're related to Ted, Ted is the son of Gilmore and Hazel. And of course, Gilmore came from Frank and Amy, and that goes up to Peter and Ingrid and J.P. Johnson and Dorothea Anders' daughter. I forget her exact last name, but hopefully that orientates you to where he is in the family. And now, Lisa, if you can help us give context for some of these pictures, and just say advance when you want to go.
Oh, sure. Yeah. This is, I believe, at the first farm. I know Dick could probably help me with that. That Gilmore and Hazel bought right after they were married. I believe, is this before they moved to the family farm? Don't know.
I think this is the family farm.
Is this a family farm? Okay, I didn't know because you're not in it, John. So I thought, I know you were
Right.
born after they moved to the family farm. So I
Yeah,
didn't know.
right, yeah.
Okay.
that's-
Yeah. What I wanted to say about the farm is Dad would tell me stories about how when he was 3 years old, he would follow Grandpa Frank around the farm. Grandpa, I guess the grandparents would come over to visit. They weren't living there anymore, but he would do a lot of repairs on the farm. And my father was just fascinated with the way that he could just make anything with his hands. And that became, I think, the first inspiration for my dad, because he was constantly working on our houses. Every house we ever had, he just gutted and then remade things with his hands. So, but yeah, that's Patty and Carl and my dad and Dick right there. You can advance. And here they are older, and John is there. And I'm not sure of the occasion. Maybe John, I don't know, or Dick, if you remember, but it's definitely a formal photo being taken there. And yeah, you can advance. And this is when he was in the Army. So he did his undergraduate at Iowa State, and then he entered the Army. He was on the GI plan, which was a game changer for our family. And he was stationed in Washington, D.C. That's where he met my mother, who was in college there at the time. But one of his assignments was working in Los Alamos, New Mexico. He built bombs. I believe it was under the Oppenheimer project. It would have been in the late 50s. And he said it was the most depressing job he's ever had, but he had to do it. But the highlight, of course, was meeting my mother. And that whole, he was in the Army for 4 years. And you can advance.
I like that he has the Corps of Engineers on his lapel. That's very interesting.
Oh, I did not know that. Yeah, he was second lieutenant when he came out of the, yeah. And yeah, I believe this is when they were engaged. My mother was from Montgomery, Alabama. And she always told me Midwest is best when it comes to people. So yeah, they dated for 4
She had
years.
that right.
They dated for 4 years, 2 years in Washington, and then she transferred to the University of Alabama, and he went back to Iowa to get his master's. And then he came to Georgia Tech to be close to her in Atlanta, where he got his PhD. And they got married and moved to Atlanta. And you can advance.
Lisa, what year did he teach at Georgia Tech? Because I think he was teaching at Georgia Tech when I went through there with a friend of mine on a spring break in about 1961 or 2. Does that sound about?
That does sound right, yes, because we moved from Atlanta to Tampa in 64. So yeah, it took 3 years to get his PhD. So yeah, and I was born in Atlanta in 61. So he was working there and teaching and getting his
Unfortunately, I can't remember the kids or much about it, but he did help me on an assignment that I had in math, and I appreciated it.
Oh, that's good.
That's
Great.
fun.
You can advance.
Lisa and Laura were toddlers playing in the backyard in Atlanta in the spring of '62, I remember.
That's right, because you lived in Alabama, right?
We were living in Alabama then,
Yeah,
for sure.
that was so
Wow.
much fun getting together. Right. Laura's 3 months older than I am. I just adore her. She's just
Sure.
known her all my life and I love her to death. But yeah, you can go in advance. Yeah, this is my brother John and myself, probably still Atlanta. We moved to Tampa, Florida in 64.
So Lisa, how many children were in your mom's family?
She had an older sister still
Okay.
living. Yeah. And yeah, and my Aunt Carolyn's in Montgomery still. Everybody's still in Montgomery. She was the only one who ever left Montgomery out of her family and out of her friends. So
Yeah, okay, thank you.
yeah. But yeah, you can advance. I think the next one's going to be Tampa. Oh no, this was one of the reunions. That's right. Yeah, you can see John with Ann there, and then my dad with my sister Ann, and there's Dick and Amy, and then Carl with Jay. they're all about the same age, right? Except Anne is the younger Anne is a year younger, I think, right? Than the three of you?
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Jay, are you staring at your Uncle Ted there?
I think so. Going, what a cool guy.
Yeah, we got a new
Actually,
name, not
you're right.
Cool Hand Luke, but Cool Hand Ted.
That's great. And yeah, that's our Pacero camper on the left, and we would take that on weekends. Yeah, my dad fishing. I thought that was kind of a funny photo. But in Tampa, we would go camping and go all around Florida. And he was teaching at the University of South Florida in electrical engineering. He helped found the department. He was the first one to be hired for electrical engineering. And he did this, as I think, if I understand correctly, with the GI Bill, you have a contract where you have to teach 10 years for the government to pay for your education. And I believe that's true, because I know he taught 3 years while he was getting his PhD in Atlanta, and then 7 years at University of South Florida in Tampa. And then after that, he told my mother, I kind of want to get out of the academic life, and I have my own patents, and I want to become a patent attorney. So then he went to St. Petersburg to law school. He commuted from Tampa, and he got his law degree in 2 years because he went during the summers. And
What university was that at, Lisa?
pardon me, his law school,
Yeah,
Stetson University in St. Petersburg, Florida. And then he was self-employed for a while in Tampa, and then decided to go with GTE in upstate New York. So we moved from Tampa to Skaneateles, New York. He worked in Seneca Falls, the town next to it. The GTE and that plant made television tubes. And so he was the patent attorney there. It was a very small branch of GTE. And it was a culture shock for our family moving from Tampa, Florida to upstate New York. But we lived there for 4 years, and we actually enjoyed it a lot.
And how old were you at that point?
I was 15, the middle of my sophomore year. Yeah, we moved up there.
Okay.
But oh yeah, you can advance. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. And then he was sent by GTE to Germany, a business trip, and so yeah, we had that welcome home sign for him. And that's my sister Anne and myself. You can advance.
Yeah.
And then yeah, this is just another reunion. I thought it was just fun with the 4 boys. We always enjoyed those reunions. We used to meet take turns meeting at everybody's houses, and then that sort of stopped, right? Then we started meeting in parks and resorts. But it was really, really fun for a while, I think. We stopped, I think, when Laura and I were in college.
Oh, wow.
So how many years of military experience among those 4?
Goodness. Well,
Well, let's see. I really was never on active duty, but the other 3 all had some stints of it. So Carl, what did he, was it 6 months or was it a year or something?
I want to say like 6 weeks. It was not long.
Yeah, it wasn't long, yeah. And then Dick, you had a couple of years, didn't you, Dick? Or
Yeah, and just short of 2 years, and I think Ted was 2 years because he's an ROTC, so he had to go in for 2 years after ROTC.
oh, so it was not 4 years. Okay.
That's what I think. Yeah.
Okay, you're probably right.
I just thought of that because of the military stature, particularly Carlton there.
Oh, right. Yeah. You're right.
Eddie's.
Great West.
That's great. Yeah. And then we went to Israel and Greece when we were living in Skaneateles. We went spring break, and yeah, my dad on a camel. Yeah, how that started is my dad called this travel agency. He wanted us to see 2 countries when we were growing up. He said, you need to see Israel, where religion started, and England, where the law started. So in 78, we went over there to Israel. We spent 1 week in Israel, 1 week in Greece. And we were with with some church groups, and I've forgotten the person that was in charge of everything said to my dad, the cheapest way to go over is if you're a minister and your family is congregation. So that's what we did. So he was called like Reverend Ted. I don't know, it's sort of, but yeah. And then we got a really good deal for our family. It was fun. It was good.
Okay.
Yeah, you had in advance. It's just a picture of my parents, probably in the 80s. And this is right before my mom got really sick with cancer. It's probably one of the last photos of when she was healthy. It's in Galveston. It's right after they moved to Houston. So after Skinny Atlas, after Seneca Falls, where he was working, he worked there for 4 years. And then GTE brought him to their headquarters in Stamford, Connecticut. So we moved to New Canaan, and he worked there for, I believe, probably 3 years. And he started working with GTE Sprint in Houston. And they said, we're starting the cell phone industry. We really need a patent attorney to help us. And so he would show me the contracts. He had to negotiate with the different towns, with all the cells, with the cells in the air, all that had to be negotiated legally. And so he was involved with all the contracts with the main cells in order to set up the cellular telephone industry. And he would have to fly down to Washington, D.C. and meet with the SEC and present everything and get everything approved. So this was in 1980. And they did gift him with one of the first cell phones. It's this huge brick. We're trying to find it in the storage room because John, my brother, wants to keep it. But he would stop. He'd use it in the car, and he would stop anytime he saw someone stranded on the side of the road. You want to use my phone? People would freak out. They had never seen anything like it before. But that is what brought my parents to Texas, and me as well. And this is Galveston. Okay, yeah.
Okay. Well, we're going to hit the technical part here. And let me start with a couple of jokes. To start with, it's an electrical engineering joke, but if you think you understand electrical motors, that's a sure sign that you don't. Very complicated. Yeah. And the second one is, how does a physicist see a cow? Well, we used to assume it's spherical. You don't worry about the tail and lips and hooves and that stuff. They're just little round balls of beef. That's all you really need to know. And that's how I see electrical motors too. They're spherical.
Yeah.
So I took one of Ted's patents and I read it, and it was just some things just jumped out at me, and I thought I'd share those with you. One, it's just such an interesting choice of problems to work on a brushless motor. That's a problem that's been around not just from like the Victorian era, but very early Victorian era. And it's not that the transistors, integrated circuits, and computers and miniaturization. It's a very old school problem to work on, a classical problem. And that's very interesting. And in reading the patent as a physicist, where cows are spherical, and you kind of gloss over the details, Ted is very detailed focused, using these things I wouldn't worry about, like hysteresis and reluctance. Like, yeah, whatever. Cows are spherical. They're little round balls of beef. He really pays attention to details there. And also his language is just shockingly precise, very detailed. And sometimes you can just tell someone's kind of glossing over stuff, and sometimes you really know this person knows what they're talking about. It's like Ted had a PhD in the subject or something. He was very good with that. So let me talk about, I can't tell you what his patent was about, but I can put it into context as to what it was. So in nature, opposites attract. It's some strange love in nature, opposites attract, like things repel. In electricity, you have a monopole, there's a charge. And in the math of Maxwell's equations, it just screams out for there to be a magnetic charge, but it just doesn't exist in our world, and we don't know why. But if you're taking electricity, you take a positive and negative charge, put them next to each other, you get what's called an electric dipole. The fields fall off very rapidly, like 1/r³ versus 1/r² for a magnetic monopole or electric monopole. But electric dipoles are important. If that's all we can produce with magnetism, is a magnetic dipole. We can't get the electric monopole. And so if you have a situation like this where you've got to take a permanent magnet on the left-hand side and an artificial magnet on the right-hand side, which you can create by, if you have a coil of wire that you run a current through, it creates a magnetic dipole, the strongest magnetic field we can get. And if you put those next to each other, nature hates that. It's a high energy state, and nature always likes to go to a lowest energy state. I don't know why, that's just the way the world is. So how a magnetic motor works roughly is you start with the dipoles aligned. Nature hates that. If you allow the permanent magnet to rotate, we then move to the second picture here, where you get one dipole pointing up and one pointing down. Nature goes, this is the way things should be. Now, being that artificial dipole can be flipped, you just take a switch and you reverse the current. It can flip the magnetic moment, and you get this third picture. Can you guys see my mouse?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that assume the permanent magnet wants to rotate clockwise. Let's say you go either way. You can then line the dipoles up again, and nature hates that because it's a high energy state, and it wants to rotate again back to a low energy state. And then all you have to do is keep flipping a switch on this current, reversing the polarity and switching the current. You switch the magnetic pole, and suddenly things start to rotate, and you have a magnet. And I can just imagine with that, whoever invented this, I don't know who did it, but you can imagine the professor talking to the graduate student whose job is to flip the switch, going, look, all you have to do is flip that switch up and down 100 times a second, precisely on time, and things will work. Why can't you get that done? Do you even want to graduate? A little professor joke. There are all kinds of architecture for electric motors. You can have AC, DC, you can have a rotating permanent magnet, you can have a permanent magnet on the outside, and you flip the inner rotating one. This is rotating the artificial magnet, the one electromagnetic on the inside. And the big thing is, how do you flip that current at just the right time so that you're constantly getting this thing rotating? And they came up with something called a brush, which you can see on the right here. This is a fancy brush. In the old days, the name came from a paintbrush. You can imagine a brush of wires laying on some type of metal plate, and it would rotate. And once it came off, you'd hit another plate called the commutator. That would reverse the polarity. So the switching is built into the system. And there's such a brutal elegance to the brush. It's kind of like a sledgehammer. They're cheap to make. They're easy to fix. They're trivial to break, but they're also very cheap to replace. It's complicated, but they work, and they're kind of brutally efficient, like a sledgehammer. Ted, in the age of Adam Ant and wanting to, in computers and integrated circuits and transistors, went back to do a brushless motor, which is absolutely brilliant. And it's just kind of adorable. It's so classical. It's very much a family thing, that what we would expect from a Lindgren, I guess. And just for fun, for what Ted did here, I actually pulled out the language because it's just shocking. An alternator / synchronous motor structure providing varying reluctance paths for radially directed unidirectional magnetic fields by means of a unique rotor stator configuration in which inner and outer rotor poles and a rotor pole connecting means surrounding one end and the inner and outer cylindrical surfaces of a hollow cylindrical stator. Obviously. I have no idea what that actually means. I know some of the physics and electrical engineering are very different, because you get down to a very specific application in electrical engineering, and reluctance motors were big in the 60s or 70s. And I know he's using something like that with this second part here with all the gear. It looks like a teeth. It's not a gear and they're not teeth, but he's trying to very precisely manipulate the magnetic field. Yeah, very interesting. And he also had 3 versions of that. Now, what Ted's patent is about 40 years old now, or this one is. And what happened since then, because you need to mechanically somehow control this flipping of the switch, when you fast forward 40 years, like the high-end Tesla, not the lower ones, but the very top-end Tesla, they just use as Bruce pointed out in the last newsletter, something like a Raspberry Pi and Arduino board. You just get a computer to sit there, look at, and they can detect it, basically the acceleration, the velocity, the position, and the load. And that computer, which takes, in the computer's world, is a lifetime between flipping. And they can flip that load or flip the switch to get maximum either efficiency, torque, or power. They don't do it mechanically anymore. It's better to use the computer because you can be so much more precise. You have some flexibility. Of course, every once in a while, computers hang up and you have to reboot and so forth. But we've gone to a very different solution. Very interesting what Ted did there. So let's go back to more Ted stuff, Lisa.
This with my brother John, they refinished this Ford Mustang. I think it's 1960, but I'm not sure. Dick would know, I'm sure. But yeah, that was John's car. He helped him do that.
Nice.
Oh yeah, this is, yeah. So after my mom died in Houston, my dad moved in with us, sold his house. And so, yeah, my twins were born. That's Kenton. We had Barney for their 2-year-old birthday party. He was always such a fun G-dad. In advance. And yeah, this is with Drax. This is my brother John's son, Drax. He's the oldest grandchild. And this was, this kind of reminded me of our own reunions when, Carl would have Jay and Dick would have Amy and my dad would have Ann and Uncle John would have Ann. And so yeah, this is John with Drax, my dad with Brinsley, and then my husband Eric with Kenton at our house in our neighborhood. And this was after the stroke. We were able to get him out of the care center, occasionally, and we went to the circus in Dallas. That's where I should probably backtrack and say that he had his stroke after he moved to Dallas. He bought a house. He was working hard on it. Real short story. That day, but we believe it was August 6th, 2002, his neighbor, a very young woman, needed some help with her yard. And so my dad went and he hired a homeless person who was looking for work. And the homeless person did not know what he was doing. So dad went and did all the yard work himself. And it was, triple digit temperatures in August in Dallas. And what we think happened is he came home, he took a shower. He took the homeless person to the grocery store, got him some food, then dropped him off. Then he came home, took a shower, and emailed the neighbor because the neighbor had expressed some concerns about having a homeless person in her yard. And he apologized. I know because she sent me the email later, and he apologized that he would never do it again. He was very sorry. And anyway, the next day is when we think he had his stroke because he was found in front of the closet. Half his body just completely went paralyzed. And so that was Tuesday, August 7th. He lay on the floor, we believe, that entire day, that entire night. August 8th, Wednesday, was my birthday. And I kept waiting for dad to call me. And in fact, we were supposed to talk about the weekend plans. He was going to come down to the Woodlands for that weekend. Didn't hear from him. 9 o'clock at night, my brother called to wish me a happy birthday. And I said, "Oh, is dad with you?" Because, they lived in Dallas together. And he said, "No, I haven't seen dad in a few days." And I said, "Well, he hasn't called. It's my birthday." He goes, "Well, he just probably forgot." And I said, "I don't think so. He's never forgotten before." And, anyway, so John, he went over, and as soon as he got over to the house, it was dark. He could see my dad's truck. He knew dad was there. He knew something had happened. And he went in, and my dad was on the floor and, help. And we got him to the emergency center. We were told that night that we were going to lose him. And so my husband and I grabbed our kids, who were almost 3 years old, twins, and we got in the car and sped over there. But that was, he almost lived 20 years with the stroke. He was supposed to die that night, and then he lived another almost 20 years. So anyway, this is at the circus in Dallas with the 6 grandchildren. JD, my sister's youngest child, refused to wear a red nose. So
Okay, that's the one on the bottom left.
Yeah, the one on the bottom left, exactly, yes.
And so help us with all six.
Yeah, okay, so JD's the bottom left. Kenton is my son behind him.
Okay,
Drax is next to Kenton, Brinsley in front of Drax.
okay,
Noelle is my brother's youngest child, the younger daughter, on dad's lap. And then that's
Okay.
Betsy, my sister Ann's oldest child. So we each
Okay.
have two. We each have boy, girl.
got it.
It's kind of
Okay.
all worked out that way. Yeah. So, and yeah, this was right after the stroke. We'd had a Captain Hook, Peter Pan birthday party for the kids, 4th birthday. And so we went over to see Dad in Dallas, and he was in his care center then. And yeah, we were trying to play pirates with him. It was a little bit hard, but yeah, he was doing the best. And this is like one of the last pictures, I mean, we ever took. It just, we did move him to Atlanta. My sister lives there, and he was in an assistant care center there, which was a little more cheerful than the place he was in Dallas. And he had more men around him, which I think was more important.